Hello everyone, we're going to be reacting to Destiny 2 scrapped, cut, and deleted content Bungie didn't release. The final shape comes out tomorrow and I'm really into this kind of stuff, like what content that we didn't get and stuff that could have been in Destiny 2, so make sure you guys leave a like, comment, subscribe. Let's get into it.
In this video, we're rounding up every bit of scrapped, unreleased, and cut content that we'll never see in
What the
Destiny.
heck?
Not talking about sunset or vaulted content, but things that were actually
Bro, look at the old
made
screens.
and maybe released, but never did for various reasons. It's a pretty normal thing in all creative industries. But it's interesting to look at things that were left on the cutting room floor and why. If you like,
Why were they?
behind the scenes
Oh, I
development
remember that.
secrets,
That's
then
like the
this video is
galaxy
for you.
pools.
There are perks, characters, raids, storylines, expansions, cutscenes, exotics,
Prismatic. And that was an exotic shader?
So a lot of things
It's coming in the final shape. Could be coming,
During
you
the
never
Destiny
know.
1 beta, there were 3 features which were removed before release, which was the ability to lock in your perk tree choices.
Lock in your perk
on
tree.
Weapons, you can see it was called lock in.
It's called lock in. What the kids say nowadays, guys. Crazy.
Where it locks your perk options, but it boosts your gun's attack stats. So a little bit like masterworking. On armor, it was called Harden, which would boost the defense.
I see. Harden.
On subclass trees, the final perk was called Illumination, which
Illuminati.
in the perks and would boost your stats. So Titans would get more armor, Warlocks more recovery, and Hunters agility.
I see.
In between the beta and final release in 2014, Bungie scrapped the features altogether. It's pretty obvious
Why'd they scrap it?
It is a cool idea, but
it
would
was
destroy
broken.
the player's choice and ability to customize. Imagine getting a perfect roll and now it's locked in on some awful scope or mag option that you thought was good in the first month of release, back when we knew nothing, but especially for subclasses it would have been a nightmare. There was also a different shader system called Type 1 and 2 coating. So Legendary Armor had Type 1 coating, where it could be recolored using version 1 or newer micromaterial shaders.
It's crazy.
Exotics required Type 2 coating, so there were different rarities of shaders, which sounds interesting, especially the fact that you
Kinda
could
looks
shade
cool,
items
to be honest. Like all
individually,
these,
which wasn't a thing
the
in
symbols
Destiny 1.
actually look
Of
better
course,
than
Bungie
what we
changed
had in
this
game.
to be the simple shader system, where you just put one on your whole character and that's it. Some players liked it as it looked more consistent all across the board, but it wasn't very customizable. But it's funny that Destiny 1 originally had individual shaders like we eventually got in Destiny 2. A long-requested controversial feature that was in very early builds of Destiny was trading. Being able to trade with other
you could trade.
You can see it in this menu early on, and Bungie mentioned it a few times, the ability to gamble and trade. They eventually decided not to add it because it would...
Bro, you could literally trade people on Xbox 360.
A lot of the loot. It would also create a black market. Some players would probably get scammed and tricked. There'd be too much risk of just bad experiences. Bungie even met with Blizzard, who obviously know a lot about MMOs.
They're definitely trading with each other in the studio.
Not to add trading to Destiny, as it would
but they're
be
like,
a
all right,
mistake,
this seems a little broken.
The early development of Destiny had loads of features and ideas that of course never made it into the full game. We can see inventory screens where you had shoulders and gloves,
screens of your character,
simply called belts.
inventory screens.
Osiris as a reputation vendor before the
reputation, that looks bad. Story, bounty, raid, death of darkness.
In my last video, the Vault of Glass was called the Glass Throne. You can see the original planets and activities from the director screen. There's also concept art from artist Jamie
Dude, I would used to be so much into this.
Destiny was originally a
Joe
Staten's
concept
art. One of the
art.
playable races was called Tiger Man. There were enemies called the Moth People, and of course the fan favorite Giant Frog, which we have never seen.
Bro, Destiny used to be so
part
cool.
Of the early version of Destiny 2, but was cut before release when they changed the story around. During the reveal event, the menu showed the Exos crash strike on Nessus, saying that Siva Corrupted Fallen made their nest. There's a typo there, in a crashed ship, and we cannot allow Siva to grow a foothold here. So this crashed ship is on Nessus, of course, is Exos black. And we also have this concept art showing an early version of this crashed ship with 3 Siva logos on the wing, the shuttle, and the watchtower. If you played Rise of Iron, you'll definitely recognize this symbol. And there are also the red Siva coming all out from the ship.
Symbol.
In the lore, Failsafe and Tara Khan both mentioned Siva being on board this ship, and we aren't sure why Bungie decided to remove Siva from Destiny 2. Loads of people are always asking
because they're too OP, they infect everyone.
But originally it was Nessus.
Sorry about that, guys.
You probably know that Destiny used to have a completely different story that was scrapped, but also in that original version was a prototype Hive raid that we'll never see. So Luke Smith revealed that Vault of Glass was not supposed to be the first raid, and this Hive prototype raid had loads of encounters but was scrapped.
They're gonna hit me with a commercial. Come on. Oh, at least it's the Yu-Gi-Oh! World Championship.
And this Hive prototype raid had loads of encounters but was scrapped, and some parts of it became Crota's End and King's Fall for the DLCs.
What?
One of the
Crota's End.
encounters became the Fogoth Summoning Pit Strike. You can actually see this concept art that shows the encounter with 5 Guardians. Which
Oh,
shows
so
this
that used
was
to be a
part of the
raid, huh?
And Fogoth was also massive. He sticks out as much bigger and more raid-like than any other Destiny 1 strike boss, which were mostly just regular sized bosses, not as unique, but you can also see in early trailers there was a different room layout. And this encounter was mostly
That could have been a raid, guys.
To turn it into
We're already
a strike,
doing a raid without
and
knowing
in
it.
King's Fall, Golgoroth became that giant ogre they originally wanted to make. YouTuber Rocket Sloth spoke to a Bungie developer called Dan Miller who worked on this prototype raid, and he said there were enemies with gravity guns that would knock you off platforms and doom buttons that would blow up everything if you didn't interact with them in time, which of course is the Annihilator totems found in both Crota and King's Fall. This prototype raid also had a bridge encounter where you carried a big hammer over a bridge and the brutes could only be killed with this relic, which of course became Crota's sword. Interestingly, Crota's Oversoul was the final boss room of this raid. It also featured the Court of Oryx opening encounter that ended up being in King's Fall. So some of these parts were added to the game, but most were thrown out and we'll never see again. So this explains why King's Fall was so massive and why Crota's End was so small, because they were originally one, and also why we got back-to-back Hive raids, which they wouldn't normally do. The reason for this being
They were
switched
originally
to
one
Glass was because the original Destiny 1 story had the Hive as the main villain, so naturally they wanted a Hive raid, but when they rebooted the story, the Vex became the main villain.
I see. It all makes sense now.
They wanted a new Vex raid to match it. The original story is another thing that was famously scrapped. Destiny had a very different story up until 2013, which featured the Crow as a Cade-like character, which is why when they resurrected Aldrin, he's now called Crow. This is a callback to his original character. Osiris was also a character on Mercury that you do missions for, and the Stranger was his assistant before she was called the Stranger. She was just this robot assistant. The Warmind Rasputin was also an Exo seen in this artwork that got kidnapped by Oryx and held on the Dreadnought, where the final missions took place, and this would lead into that Hive Mega Raid.
I see.
There were also 2 Destiny 1 expansions that were scrapped and turned into expansions for Destiny 2, which were Vex Void featuring Osiris on Mercury. This became Curse of Osiris, and then Forge of the Gods was renamed into Gods of Mars and eventually became Warmind, which was set on Mars. Now, Mars is one of the most
So those are originally supposed to be Destiny 1?
cut and scrapped content, because in Destiny 1 there was originally supposed to be a new second area on Mars called the Pyramidion, which you can see in this concept art. The Crucible map Crossroads takes place here, and you can see the Pyramidion structure in the backdrop, and this area is called the Lost Oasis. But multiple Bungie employees anonymously through Jason Schreier revealed that this was cut and moved into Destiny 2 to become Io. This of course is where the Pyramidion was and is also called the Lost Oasis, funnily enough, and Io is a very clearly green remake of Mars with the sand and the tree stumps, the Cabal and the Vex, and also in Destiny 1 version it was said that there would be a Cabal base and a Warmind bunker, as the Warmind Charlemagne was supposed to have a vault here, but Charlemagne was eventually cut. Bungie initially planned multiple Warminds, but later scrapped the others and just had Rasputin. This is a secret unused area in Destiny 2
the Galaxy
Pools. To date, it has not appeared in any content and is only accessible by glitching out of bounds. It's been in the game
What if that's
since
part of the final shape?
but was only found in 2019 by a player called Froggy, who was trying to get out of bounds into the Shard of the Traveler in the dark forest of the European Dead Zone, but he stumbled across this very strange area. It is one of the coolest bases I've ever seen in Destiny, and it looks kind of related to the Nine or the Awoken. You can see the Milky Way galaxy in the distance.
Yeah, we're definitely going there.
Anywhere else
They're saving
in Destiny, and Bungie designers obviously spent a lot of time working on this very unique skybox. The only thing that looks a bit similar is where the pyramids were in the end cutscene. It's almost the same spot, but even more strangely, the galaxy moves around the sky, which obviously galaxies don't orbit, so maybe the platform is rotating slowly. So of course this would have had some purpose initially, but seeing as it's been here for 7+ years means it's probably been scrapped, although it doesn't make sense why it would still be in the game files.
That's actually really wild, guys.
Famous opening cinematic, which shows the scrapped original story in a very early version, and in it we can see a rough outline of what they wanted to show, of the astronauts landing on Mars and finding the Traveler. But instead of seeing the Traveler, they see a mysterious woman that's described as a witch, speaking an alien language, saying the Traveler is coming, and then it starts raining. There's also images where you can see the weird alien structure on Mars, similar to these concepts we've seen, and the creator of the cinematic said the woman is a witch, and you can see more of the woman with the white hair that looks a bit like those veiled statues found on the pyramids.
I see, it's all coming in
fruition.
fruition.
Also originally planned 5 enemy races, as you can see the Vex, the Fallen, Cabal, Hive, and
Commercials, you hate them.
The Vex, the Fallen, Cabal Hive, and the smoky human figures in the pyramid ships, but they scrapped the 5th race. The pyramids could be seen in Destiny 1 loading screens and various artwork, but eventually they merged the 5th race into one singular being called the Witness, with the black body and the white head, and he's basically a collection of this whole race combined into one. There's an alternate second set of the original Vault of Glass armor that was in the game files but never actually got released. According to director Luke Smith, they planned on having 2 sets of armor for the raid for normal and hard mode, and players for a long time are wondering when this blue gear would be available, as they were publicly in the API with the perks, the icons and everything. But they decided to scrap this set and only have one bronze set that we all know, and it wasn't until King's Fall when they did implement 2 armor sets, one for normal and one for hard, being the red and white set and the black harrowed set for hard mode. And they would do this more often again with Wrath of the Machine with the red and black set, and then again with Destiny 2's Leviathan, but the blue Vault of Glass set is something we'll never see. Destiny 1 never had any exotic sparrows, but there was one in the game file since launch that was never actually released. It's called the S99 Dawn Chaser, and for the longest time people were wondering when it would release, considering it was the only exotic, so people wanted this thing. It had the highest speed and durability of any sparrow in the game. Its description read, "The future and all of its promise awaits you," and it also had the unique perk only found on the Vault of Glass Timebreaker Sparrow. This is where you hold down the boost and it goes into overdrive until it eventually explodes, which was pretty funny and couldn't be found anywhere else. Of course, Destiny 2 has plenty of exotic sparrows and now skimmers, but the Dawn Chaser was Destiny 1's only exotic sparrow that never actually got released.
They gotta bring back SRL,
There was also an
bro.
exotic shader added in the Destiny 2 game files in Witch Queen, which was seemingly scrapped a few months later. It's called the Prismatic Shader, and as you can see, it was available in an Eververse package called the Alluring Looks Bundle. The shader had a placeholder icon, and its rarity was exotic, which had never been seen before, and the description says it contains 1 exotic shader. Bungie never released the backstory, but many believe this became the photo finish shader added in Guardian Games around the time it was removed. This is one of the most unique shaders that cycles through colors on glowing armor, but the exotic shader is another item we'll never see. Peter Dinklage, the original voice of the Ghost, went through a lot of issues to the point where Bungie eventually scrapped his lines completely from the game. In the Destiny Alpha, he was widely criticized for his lackluster delivery, with one of the most infamous lines in the opening mission,
"That wizard came from the moon."
This became an instant meme, so much so that Bungie removed this line and even made t-shirts of the quote, but before the beta they then edited his voice from sounding like a regular dude talking to you to being more digitized and robotic.
This was one of Skywatch's old array stations.
When the game released, his voice lines were still criticized, so the following year, with the Taken King, they removed him altogether and replaced him with Nolan North to redo all the old lines, and has
They did
also
that
voiced
for
the
dirty,
Ghost ever
huh?
since. One of the strangest things that we have never got an answer about is something called the Magician. Right before Destiny 2's launch, Edge magazine had a feature talking about their early access to the game and interviews with developers, and they said there's plenty more we can't talk about. One day you must ask us about the Magician. I've had this written down in my notes since 2017, waiting to see what this would be, and there's absolutely nothing in the game that's ever released called the Magician, so it's still really weird. It could be anything, an exotic, a vendor, a character. Maybe it was an early name for something that got changed, or maybe it was scrapped.
Could be anything,
but either way,
guys.
it was really random, something I've always wondered about, but I guess we'll never know. Before Forsaken, towards the end of Year 1, Bungie were actually planning on adding exotic armor catalyst to the game. Developers talked about it in a few live streams, and I was actually at a Bungie event where they talked again about exotic armor catalyst not being ready for Forsaken, but they were hoping to add them sometime after, and they were going to have some slight increase on the exotic perks. One example they said was the Lion Ramparts having even longer boost duration, and of course this idea ended up being scrapped, probably in favor of just Masterworking armor, which gives a similar stat boost, but I would imagine balancing wise it would probably be a nightmare if every exotic armor piece had a perk increase or additional perk like the weapons do, but it's another idea they never ended up adding. One of the strangest and rarest characters in Destiny was a vendor called Yuna, exclusive to mainly Korean and Asian servers. She was kind of like an Eververse Xur type vendor that offered exotics. Most players on Asian servers could visit her, but you can only buy stuff if you're an IGR benefactor, which means Internet Gaming Room or Cafe in Korea. So only players in these specific Korean gaming cafes can actually get these items. The exotics were on rotation and were free, but were temporary, so they would disappear, and they also weren't upgradable, infusable, or gave materials when they were dismantled. They also wouldn't count to your collection, so they were just basically rented exotics to play around with for a session. But these days, a lot of gaming cafes in Korea apparently don't have Destiny 2 installed anymore, and even if you can find one, people are saying the game still doesn't recognize you as an IGR benefactor, so she basically doesn't work for anyone anymore and is slowly being removed. You might still be able to find her on certain Asian servers, but you can't actually get anything from her without that IGR benefactor status. A lot of players have always wanted to see her added into the rest of the game, but it's very unlikely we'll ever see her added properly. Technically, the biggest piece of scrapped content was Destiny 3, the entire third installment. This was actually in development since 2017, right after Destiny 2 came out. The end cutscene showed the pyramids being activated and heading over, and they were supposed to arrive with Destiny 3. This is basically a roadmap. Under Activision, they were always obliged to make a third game, technically even a fourth initially, but Bungie knew this wasn't sustainable to keep jumping games and leaving one behind like Call of Duty, so they wanted to make Destiny 2 into a live service model which was more sustainable. So after they split with Activision, they decided to scrap Destiny 3 and turn the content they had made into 3 big expansions, Beyond Light, Witch Queen, and Lightfall, which were all about the pyramids arriving and us using darkness subclasses. It is one of the most debated decisions in Destiny's history, whether they should have made Destiny 3 leaving 2 behind, or kept going with Destiny 2 and adding more content in, but then having to vault and sunset, as we all know. But a lot of people think Bungie might still eventually make a third game, but that remains to be seen. The factions were also one of the biggest parts of Destiny that were scrapped by Bungie. I made a whole video covering their origins in Destiny 1 as the faction wars, to the faction rallies in Destiny 2, why they were removed, and also what they're doing now, because not a lot of people know they weren't completely removed and are still hinted to return at some point. You can click here to watch the video.
Guys,
it's really
that's gonna do it for the video. That was my reaction. Pretty crazy, wild stuff
Don't
out
forget
there,
to like
guys.
the video before you go.
Thank you all.
Thanks for watching, and I'll see you all in the next one.
Shout out to Unknown Player. Go follow Unknown Player. Very well created video. Peace.
Dante Networking lets AV professionals route